Hi everyone! Diablo 4 Season 2 has brought a major shift in the overall game balance and character defenses. There has been a resistance rework and attached to that a rework of how armor works. And both of these are very important factors for your character survival now. I think this is something that is still commonly misunderstood. A lot of people keep asking me why they are constantly dying, and I want to use this opportunity to clear up a few things and give you some tips on how to build a tanky character that can survive the toughest content, because you don't have to be one-shot from off-screen by a corpse bow necessarily. So let's dive right in, put on our nerdiest glasses and see what it's all about. By the way, these glasses are not for my eyesight, they are gaming glasses. And this brings us to the sponsor of today's video, GMG Performance. Did you know that the average time spent for an American in front of a screen per day reaches over 7 hours these days, and the trend is only going up? I guess this comes as no surprise, COVID and all in the last few years, but it only really goes in one direction, and it means one thing. Your eyes are going to suffer from looking at PC screens or mobile screens all day long. And this is where these glasses really help you out. These glasses help reduce eye strain by filtering out the blue light that comes from the screen, increasing your focus, preventing headaches, and helping you with your sleep at night. Especially the last point was quite interesting to me because when I stream, I usually end quite late at night and I might have trouble falling asleep afterwards. So I was eyeing with the idea, pun intended, of actually getting these glasses anyway, and GMG sent it to me for free to try them out. So I've been doing that the last week or two, and I gotta say I actually noticed an improvement in my sleep patterns. So if you're looking to improve your eye health when sitting in front of a PC for long hours, or just trying to fall asleep more easily, for example, I really recommend you to go check out GMG Performance. Here's the website, there's a link in the description and in the pinned comment, and if you use that link, then you also get a 25% off for the next 48 hours after release of this video. So go click it now, check them out, and see what kind of offers they have. And last but not least, they also offer sleep gummies that you can take right before going to bed for a much deeper and restorative rest. And now, let's go back to the video. So first things first, the number one priority for building good defenses on your character are the resistances. So with the resistance rework in Season 2, you want to cap out on all of those resistances at least 70. There are ways to go beyond 70 all the way up to 85, but you are kind of expected to have this minimum defensive layer of extreme damage reduction against elemental types. 70% is no joke, and you can barely acquire this from any other means. So what this means is that you usually have to roll some resistances on your gear. In the case of a rogue, for example, a really good way to do this is with boots. You can just put like a double resist or triple resist on boots and some movement speed there. And then you can have maybe another 1 or 2 rolls somewhere else on a chest or on the helm or something like that. And of course, you have those gems here. So this is relatively obvious. And as early as possible, you want to get your resistances up. This has become much more important now. So if the yours are not capped and you're dying, then this is most likely why. But something that is a lot more complicated to understand is armor, and this is actually the bigger topic of this video. So with armor, you now no longer reduce half of the elemental damage, but only physical damage. But physical damage remains part of the most dangerous of the entire game, because almost every single monster can do physical damage, but not every single monster can do fire or lightning or cold damage. So that depends usually on like elite affixes or certain like elemental themed attacks or so. But for the most part, armor actually becomes your number one priority if you engage with high-end content, especially in the higher Nightmare dungeons. What you see here now is that my rogue and it has 10,300 armor unbuffed, which says that I have 100% physical damage taken reduction. So this 100% damage reduction is obviously a lie in this tooltip because the actual cap is 85%. You cannot reduce damage more than 85%. It's the same as increasing your maximum resistances. They have chosen exactly the same cap for that, and it has been unchanged since launch of the game. So this is exactly what you see here. Even if you are level 1 with an armor value of 2000, you cannot go over 85% damage reduction, and it will remain at exactly that level until you hit a higher level monster, and then it will go down. And one thing that you can see here is that it does go down very rapidly at the start and then less and less later on. So you see here that this 85% damage reduction like immediately falls off a cliff if you go over this kind of like minimum level to have your armor capped. And this is also something that I think a lot of people are not really aware of. So when you look at this, for example, in game, it will show you the armor cap value of your own character level. So if I am level 100 and I fight level 100 monsters, I am capped. I have way too much. In fact, you need roughly 9.2k armor to have 85% damage reduction against level 100 monsters. So if I take off, for example, this pair of pants here, I have 9k, and now you see it's 82%. So very near the cap, and these last 200 something actually reach to 85. Now the thing is that in the game there's actually no way to tell exactly how much armor you need to fight a certain monster level above your own character level or below your own character level, but we only really care about above. But what we know is that the actual armor cap for level 154 monsters that you can find in tier 100 Nightmare Dungeons is actually 13.3k armor. And if you look at this graph here, you see that if you are not reaching that armor cap, your damage reduction falls off this cliff. And if you want to understand a little bit what that means, then I can give you an example. So let's say that you are fighting a tier 100 Nightmare Dungeon monster, level 154 monster, and you have armor cap, you have 13.3k, and under those conditions, you take 5000 damage from a hit. Now, as you can see here, if you have slightly less armor, or rather if the monster would be slightly higher, in that case, you would fall off this armor cap, and quite significantly so. So you see here that if you look at the remaining damage taken, you go from 15% damage taken to, for example, 30%, double that in just a tiny step here, as you can see. So what this means in practical terms is that the damage reduction at armor cap and right before armor cap is a massive difference. So if you stack a lot of armor but you barely miss the cap, you will take a lot more damage compared to trying to stack armor at lower values. This also means that armor becomes much more valuable the more you have until you hit that plateau where you have armor cap. So you can see this here in game as well. So I showed this example where I took off those pants and I was like, barely not at cap now. I'm missing like 200 or so. And for example, I could take off a skull as well, and then you're going to see my damage reduction is going to drop even further to probably something like 78 or so % damage reduction. So if you look at this here, 77. But this may still look quite high, but if you look at the actual damage taken, it is significantly more. I now take 23% damage instead of only 15. And this means that the example with this 5000 damage crossbow shot, for example, is now 50% more or so from that value. So I take like 7.5k damage. And now if you take off, one other item, I have 6k armor and I have only 41% damage reduction, and I take literally quadruple damage. So instead of 5000, I would take 20,000, and I would absolutely get one shot now. And to show you this in actual practice, I can go back to the example that you've seen in the intro, where I got one-tapped by this crossbow from off screen. So there's like this guy, and he snipes me, and boom, here is the one shot. And I decided to take this as an opportunity to try out a little bit like how much it really feels different when I do some tweaks. So you see here in this screenshot, I have 12.6k armor when that happened, and I was not able to survive that shot. But then I started tweaking my armor values a little bit to improve it to a higher value, and then try the same again. So you see here now, for example, I have 14k armor, I'm capped, and I go in again and I try it out and see now the difference when this guy shoots at me. So I was just standing there tanking this guy, and you see my health bar, I sometimes barely even drop below half life when I have armor capped, compared to just missing 700 armor. It may not seem like much, but it is a day and night difference in how much damage you take. Now, it was a bit of a struggle to actually get this guy to hit me sometimes, because even standing still he would miss occasionally. But you see the difference here. Previously this guy was one-tapping me, and now he doesn't even come close. And here's another test where I reduced my armor to roughly 300 or so under the cap. And you can also see the difference in the damage I take here. So I went back to this guy and let him shoot at me. And you see here that I do drop noticeably lower than before. So there is a bit of RNG in the damage range of this guy. Sometimes he would hit me down to 50%, sometimes down to 30% or so previously. But here I would actually drop really close to death, really often actually. And here's another example where I just removed one skull, and as you can see here I had 12,500 armor. So now I'm like roughly 700 or so away from the cap, and notice the difference this time. So this is literally just one skull that I removed from my setup. And you can see how low I dropped suddenly just from this little difference that I have in my armor. I dropped down to like 10%, sometimes 5% or so of my life, just standing there, where previously with like only 700 more armor, I was just chilling with like 50% life left occasionally. So what this means in practice is that as you go towards higher level content, if you are under leveled, you take significantly more physical damage. The elemental resistances will always apply at the same value. You just need to make sure that they are capped. You have to like play around the world tier difficulty penalty and make sure you get a total of 120 of each of them. That is usually quite easy, just with a few rolls as I mentioned, and then you are set on elemental damage. But on the other hand, for armor there is this scaling formula where you go to higher level monsters and you take more and more damage, unless you cap your armor with higher and higher values. So for example, if you would go in and you start blasting with 10k armor, then you're gonna be totally fine against level 110 monsters, even level 120 monsters. But eventually there comes this point where suddenly it becomes a nightmare. It becomes super hard to survive because you fall off a cliff with your damage reduction. It's just like in this graph here. So once you reach that breaking point, you're gonna absolutely get annihilated by most physical damage. And this means that if you want to go with your build all the way to tier 100, you want to hit that 13.3k armor cap. And if you can't quite reach it, then it may not be such a bad idea to go for a few tiers lower than that, and then maybe try to optimize your gear around it later on until you can hit that armor cap with the level that you want. Now, I actually personally don't know the exact formula of how much armor you need at any given Nightmare Dungeon tier, but we do know that you need 9.2k at level 100 and you need 13.3k at level 154, and then all the other values will lie somewhere in that range of roughly 4,000 difference basically. So like this you can actually get a bit of an idea of how much armor you're supposed to have. And well, one really good way of increasing your armor is the aspect of disobedience. This used to be like the #1 defensive aspect anyway, so you can put this on any defensive slot. And if you don't have enough armor, then you definitely should. So this is this one here. However, it is a temporary buff, and it's also something to keep in mind. If you cap your armor only because of this thing, and then you need like, let's say 50 stacks of it to even be capped, then again, if you don't have all those stacks, let's say you only stack it to 40, you suddenly take a lot more damage. So your incoming damage can be extremely spiky because of the aspect of disobedience, because either it's up or it's not, or it's like only partially stacked. And again, if you are not fully capped, you have this massive increase in damage taken. And this is also why, for example, in my own builds, when I do T100 Nightmare Dungeon pushing, especially on hardcore, I kind of like the consistency of being able to take a hit and knowing how much a certain hit of a certain monster does to me. And this means I usually just cap my armor without disobedience. I just leave it out and I try to get, for example, 3% armor rolls with a good value, high item power pieces. And like this, for example, with skulls and maybe something like an iron skin elixir, I can usually cap out or get very close to the cap. And sometimes this is enough. Sometimes I still throw in the disobedience aspect, but there are ways to increase your armor in a significant way, even for classes that don't really have a lot of armor access. So I hope with this video I could help you out and bring across the point of the importance of stacking your armor very high and trying to reach the armor cap. If you're just interested in low-end speed farming, easy content, Duriel farming, for example, all this stuff is actually level 100 if you farm outdoor content or Hell Tides or something like that. So you don't need that much armor, but especially on the high end of Nightmare Dungeons, you really have to invest into that because this is your #1 survival tool. So stack your armor, guys. I'm gonna leave you with this. Hope you liked this video and see you guys next time.